The rain had been falling for 3 hours straight, turning the Brooklyn streets into rivers of reflected neon and shadow. It was the kind of November rain that soaked through jackets and chilled bones, the kind that kept most people indoors, wrapped in blankets with hot drinks and the blue glow of television screens. But Sarah Martinez didn't have the luxury of staying home on nights like this. The chrome-edged clock above the diner's entrance read 2:47 a.m. when Sarah pushed through the kitchen's swinging doors, carrying a half-empty coffee pot in one hand and a dish rag in the other. The Riverside Diner had been her second home for the past 3 years, a 1950s-style establishment that somehow survived in a neighborhood that couldn't decide if it wanted to gentrify or remain authentically working class. Red vinyl booths lined the windows, their surfaces cracked and patched with duct tape. The black and white checkered floor had lost its shine decades ago, and the fluorescent lights overhead flickered occasionally, casting strange shadows across the empty tables. "How much longer on this shift?" Sarah asked, wiping down the counter for the third time that hour. Her reflection in the polished chrome napkin holder showed what she already knew. Exhaustion etched into every feature. Dark circles shadowed her brown eyes, and her black hair, pulled into a ponytail, had started to escape in wisps around her face. "4 more hours, mija," answered Carlos from the kitchen. He'd been the night cook at Riverside for 15 years, a stocky man in his 50s with permanently stained apron and hands that never stopped moving. "You okay? You've been quiet tonight." Sarah forced a smile. "Just tired. Emma had a fever yesterday. Didn't sleep much." That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. Her 6-year-old daughter had recovered quickly. Children always did. But the pharmacy bill had taken the last of Sarah's emergency fund. Again. She'd done the math 3 times during her break. Rent was due in 5 days, and even with her day job at the grocery store, she'd be short by $200. The thought sat in her stomach like a stone. "You work too hard," Carlos said, his voice gentle with concern. "When's the last time you took a day off?" "Can't remember," Sarah admitted, refilling the sugar dispensers along the counter. "But that's life, right? We do what we have to do." Through the rain-streaked windows, she could see the empty street. A taxi passed, its tires hissing on wet asphalt. A homeless man shuffled by under the awning of the closed bodega across the street, his shopping cart loaded with plastic bags and cardboard. This neighborhood knew hardship. Everyone here was fighting their own battle, carrying their own weight. Sarah had learned not to complain. There was always someone who had it worse. The bell above the door chimed at 3:15 a.m. Sarah looked up from counting tips, automatically putting on her customer service smile. "Welcome to Riverside. Sit anywhere you—" The words died in her throat. The man who entered was tall, over 6 feet, wearing a dark wool coat that dripped water onto the checkered floor. His collar was turned up against the rain, and a black baseball cap was pulled low over his face. He moved slowly, carefully, like someone who was in discomfort but trying hard not to show it. There was something deliberate about the way he chose his seat. The last booth by the window, table 7, where he could see both the entrance and the kitchen door. Sarah's heartbeat kicked up a notch, though she couldn't immediately say why. Something about the way he carried himself set off alarm bells in the back of her mind. She'd developed good instincts working the graveyard shift. You learned to read people quickly when the only thing between you and trouble was a Formica countertop and Carlos's presence in the kitchen. "Coffee," the man said without looking up, his voice rough and low. "Black. No sugar." "Coming right up," Sarah replied, keeping her voice steady and professional. She grabbed the pot from the warmer, noting that her hand was shaking slightly. "Stop it," she told herself. "He's just another customer." But as she approached table 7, carrying the coffee and a menu, she saw his hands. They were clasped together on the table, and even in the dim diner lighting she could see the distinctive scar across his right knuckles. 3 parallel lines that looked like they'd been made by something sharp, long ago. The scar tissue was raised and white against his olive-toned skin. Sarah's breath caught. No, it couldn't be. "Menu's right there," she said, her voice barely above a whisper as she set down the coffee cup. The ceramic clinked against the saucer, betraying her nervousness. "Do you need a minute, or—" "Just the coffee," he interrupted, still not looking at her. But there was something about his profile, the angle of his jaw, the way his dark hair curled slightly at his collar. She backed away from the table, her mind racing. It had been 3 years. 3 years since she'd seen that face on the news, since she'd heard that name spoken in hushed, fearful tones. Vincent Romano. The newspapers had called him a mobster, a criminal, a man responsible for organizing illegal activities across 3 states. And then, 3 years ago, There'd been the headlines. Mafia boss Vincent Romano found dead in suspected assassination. The story had dominated the news cycle for weeks. Rival families, a power struggle, a body discovered in a warehouse in Queens. The FBI had confirmed it. The funeral had been closed casket. Sarah returned to the counter, her legs feeling unsteady. She caught Carlos looking at her curiously from the kitchen window. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said. "That guy giving you trouble?" "No," Sarah said quickly. Too quickly. "No, he's fine. Just reminds me of someone." But it was more than that. As she busied herself with refilling napkin holders and salt shakers, her eyes kept drifting back to table 7. The man sat perfectly still, both hands wrapped around the coffee cup as if drawing warmth from it. He hadn't touched the menu. He hadn't taken a sip. He just sat there staring out the rain-streaked window at the empty street. Sarah's mind traveled back 5 years, to a time she tried hard not to think about. She'd been 23, a junior at Brooklyn College, studying business administration and working part-time at a restaurant in Manhattan. It was supposed to be a good opportunity. Better tips than Brooklyn, wealthier clientele. She'd been saving for Emma's future, trying to build something better than the life she'd grown up with. That night, the night everything changed, she'd been asked to deliver food to a private room on the restaurant's 2nd floor. A special party, they'd said. Important guests. She'd carried up trays of calamari and linguine, knocked politely and entered when told. What she'd seen in that room still occasionally woke her up at night. Not violence, not anything graphic, but something worse in its implications. Men in expensive suits sitting around a table with documents spread before them. She'd recognized one face immediately, an FBI agent who'd been on the news for his work against organized crime, and sitting across from him calmly discussing terms and numbers had been Vincent Romano. She'd frozen in the doorway. The conversation had stopped. Everyone had turned to look at her. The silence had been absolute, terrifying. "Put the food down and get out," one of the men had said, his voice cold. She'd done exactly that, her hands shaking so badly the plates rattled. But as she'd turned to leave, Vincent Romano had spoken. "Wait." She'd stopped, convinced she was about to disappear. Just another unsolved case in a city full of mysteries. "What's your name?" he'd asked, his voice surprisingly calm, almost gentle. Sarah Martinez," she'd stammered. "Sarah Martinez," he'd repeated, as if committing it to memory. "You go to Brooklyn College, right? Business major. You have a daughter, Emma. She's 3 years old." The fact that he knew all this had been more frightening than any threat could have been. It meant he had people who gathered information. It meant she was already on someone's radar. "I'm sorry," Sarah had whispered. "I didn't see anything. I swear I didn't." "Everyone sees something, Sarah," Vincent had interrupted. His eyes had been dark, unreadable. "The question is what they do with what they see. You seem like a smart girl, a good mother, someone who understands that sometimes the best choice is to focus on what matters, taking care of your family." She'd nodded, unable to speak. "Go home," he'd said. "Forget you were ever in this room, and I'll make sure you and your daughter stay safe. Do we have an understanding?" "Yes," she'd managed to say. "Good. Consider us even, Sarah Martinez. But remember, I don't forget faces and I don't forget promises." She'd left that restaurant the same night, never went back, changed her phone number. For weeks, she'd expected something terrible to happen, but nothing did. Life went on. She'd graduated, started working at the grocery store and picking up diner shifts. Emma had grown, and slowly, very slowly, Sarah had convinced herself that the incident was behind her, that Vincent Romano had forgotten about the frightened young woman who'd stumbled into the wrong room. Then came the news of his death, and she'd felt something she hadn't expected. Relief mixed with an odd sense of sadness. Whatever else he'd been, he'd kept his word. She and Emma had been safe, but now... Sarah glanced back at table 7. The man had finally picked up his coffee cup, but his hand trembled as he brought it to his lips. In the fluorescent light, she could see that his face was pale, almost gray. There was a sheen of sweat on his forehead despite the cold November air. He's sick, she realized, or hurt. As if sensing her gaze, the man's eyes suddenly lifted and locked onto hers. For a moment, they just stared at each other across the empty diner. Recognition flared in his expression. She saw it clearly, followed by something that looked almost like regret. Sarah's phone buzzed in her apron pocket, making her jump. She pulled it out with shaking hands. A text from her grandmother. "Emma's fever is back. Not too high, but she's asking for you. The guilt that washed over her was immediate and familiar. Here she was, working through the night while her daughter needed her. But what choice did she have? The bills didn't pay themselves. The rent didn't care that Emma had a fever. You okay? Carlos called from the kitchen. You're white as a sheet. Before Sarah could answer, there was a sound from table 7, a muffled thump, like something heavy hitting wood. She spun around to see the man slumped forward, his upper body sprawled across the table, one arm hanging limp at his side. Carlos! Sarah shouted, rushing toward the booth. Her training kicked in. She'd taken a first aid course 2 years ago when Emma started kindergarten, wanting to be prepared for emergencies. She reached the booth and carefully touched the man's shoulder. Sir? Sir, can you hear me? No response. Up close, she could see that his coat was wet not just from rain but from something darker near his left side. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Call 911, she yelled to Carlos, who was already fumbling for the phone behind the counter. Sarah gently tried to turn the man's head to the side, checking to make sure his airway was clear. That's when she got her first clear look at his face, and all the air left her lungs. It was him, older, thinner, with lines of exhaustion and pain etched around his eyes and mouth, but unmistakably him, Vincent Romano, the man who was supposed to be dead, the man who'd held her fate in his hands 5 years ago and chosen mercy. He's still alive, Sarah shouted, pressing her fingers to his neck to find a pulse. It was there, rapid and weak, but there. He's unconscious but breathing. Ambulance is on the way, Carlos called back. Should be here in 5 minutes. 5 minutes felt like an eternity as Sarah knelt beside the booth, monitoring Vincent's breathing. She grabbed a stack of clean napkins from the dispenser and pressed them carefully against his side, where she could see the dark stain spreading on his coat. Her mind raced through possibilities. Gunshot wound, stabbing. How had he gotten here? Why had he come to this specific diner? The rain continued its steady percussion against the windows. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The clock ticked toward 4 a.m., and Sarah knelt beside a ghost, keeping pressure on his wound and wondering how her simple life had suddenly become impossibly complicated again. Who is this guy? Carlos asked, approaching cautiously with the first aid kit from behind the counter. Should I know him? No, Sarah said quietly. It's better if you don't. Vincent's eyes suddenly fluttered open. They were unfocused at first, glazed with pain and fever, but then they sharpened, locked onto Sarah's face with startling intensity. His lips moved, forming words that came out as barely a whisper. Sarah! She froze. Carlos heard it too. His eyes widened as he looked between them. You know each other? Carlos asked. But Sarah couldn't answer. She was staring into Vincent Romano's eyes, seeing recognition, seeing memory, seeing something that looked almost like apology. His hand moved weakly, grasping at her wrist with surprising strength despite his condition. Sarah Martinez, he whispered again, his voice rough but certain. Brooklyn College, business major, Emma's mother. How does he know all that? Carlos demanded, his voice rising with concern. Sarah, what's going on? Sarah's throat felt tight. It's complicated. Vincent's grip on her wrist tightened slightly. Promised. Keep you safe, he managed to say. Keep my promises. Then his eyes rolled back and he lost consciousness again, his hand falling away from her arm. The sound of sirens cut through the rain. Red and blue lights began to flash against the diner's windows as an ambulance pulled up outside. Sarah stood on shaky legs, her mind reeling. The paramedics would be here in seconds. They'd take him away, ask questions, maybe call the police. And then what? What would happen when people realized that Vincent Romano wasn't actually dead? What kind of danger would that bring to her doorstep? Sarah, Carlos said urgently, gripping her shoulder. That man called you by your full name. He knows about Emma. What's going on? Are you in some kind of trouble? I don't know, Sarah admitted, and it was the truth. She watched through the window as 2 paramedics jumped out of the ambulance grabbing their equipment. I honestly don't know, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Her life had just changed again. The past she'd tried so hard to escape had found her, bleeding and unconscious at table 7 in a late-night diner, calling her name like it was the only lifeline left in the world. The bell above the door chimed as the paramedics entered, bringing with them a rush of cold air and urgent professionalism. Sarah stepped back to give them room, her hands stained with blood from the napkins she'd used to apply pressure to Vincent's wound. Carlos moved to stand beside her, his face creased with worry. What happened here? One paramedic asked. a young woman with her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She and her partner were already assessing Vincent's condition, checking his pulse, blood pressure, looking for the source of the bleeding. He came in about 20 minutes ago, Sarah explained, her voice steadier than she felt. Ordered coffee, sat down, then just collapsed. I don't know what happened to him before he got here. Do you know his name? The male paramedic asked, carefully cutting away Vincent's coat to examine the wound on his side. Sarah hesitated. If she said his name, there would be questions. Police would be called. Investigations would begin. And anyone looking for Vincent Romano would know exactly where to find the woman who'd identified him. No, she said quietly. He didn't give me his name. The female paramedic pulled out her radio. We need to notify the police. This looks like it could be a stab wound, maybe 6 to 8 hours old. No exit wound visible. Wait. Vincent's voice cut through the urgent activity, weak but clear. His eyes were open again, focused on the paramedics with surprising alertness. No police. Just take me to the hospital, please. Sir, if you've been the victim of an assault, we need to— No police, Vincent repeated, more firmly this time. He tried to sit up, winced at the pain, but his voice carried authority even in his weakened state. I'm refusing police notification. That's my right. The paramedics exchanged glances. Sir, you're in serious condition. You need immediate medical attention and— Then take me to the hospital, Vincent interrupted. But I'm invoking my right to refuse police involvement. I'm conscious, I'm lucid, and I'm making this decision. No police. Sarah watched this exchange with growing unease. Even half-conscious and injured, Vincent Romano knew exactly how to handle the situation. He knew the system, knew his rights, knew how to avoid leaving a trail. We'll discuss this at the hospital, the female paramedic said finally, clearly unhappy, but unable to force the issue. They began preparing to move him onto a stretcher. As they lifted Vincent, his eyes found Sarah's again. There was a message in that look, something urgent that he couldn't say aloud with witnesses present. Then the paramedics were wheeling him toward the door, out into the rain, into the waiting ambulance. Sarah and Carlos stood at the window watching as the ambulance pulled away, its lights painting the wet street in alternating red and blue. The taillights disappeared around a corner and suddenly the diner felt very quiet, very empty. Okay, Carlos said, turning to face her. His arms were crossed, his expression serious. You want to tell me what just happened? Sarah sank into the nearest booth, her legs finally giving out. I wish I knew. That man knew your full name. He knew about Emma. He talked about promises. Carlos sat down across from her. I've known you 3 years, Sarah. You're a good person, a good mother. But that man, something about him scared me. And I don't scare easy. He knew me from a long time ago, Sarah said carefully. Before Emma was born. Before I started working here. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time once, saw something I shouldn't have seen. He let me walk away. Made sure I stayed safe. And now he's back. Carlos finished. Looking for what? Payment? Protection? What does he want from you? I don't think he wants anything, Sarah said slowly, trying to process everything that had happened. I think he's running from something, or someone, and he came to the one place where he thought he might find help. Carlos was quiet for a long moment. Are you in danger? Maybe, Sarah admitted. Probably. I don't know. She looked down at her hands, still stained with Vincent's blood. But what was I supposed to do? Let him die? No, Carlos said softly. No, you did the right thing. You always do. He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. But now we need to think about what comes next. If that man has enemies looking for him, and they find out he was here, they might come looking for witnesses, Sarah finished. The thought made her stomach clench. They might come looking for me. The rain continued to fall outside, washing blood from the sidewalk, erasing evidence, hiding secrets. Sarah thought about Emma, asleep at home with her grandmother, innocent and unaware that her mother's past had just walked back into their lives through the door of a late-night diner. I need to call my grandmother, Sarah said, standing up abruptly. I need to make sure Emma's okay. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and dialed. Her grandmother answered on the third ring, her voice heavy with sleep but warm with affection. Mija? Is everything all right? Yes, abuela. How's Emma? You said her fever came back? It's nothing serious, just 99 degrees. I gave her some medicine and she went back to sleep. She's fine, sweet girl. You worry too much. Can you do me a favor? Sarah asked, keeping her voice level. Tomorrow morning, don't take Emma to school. Keep her home, keep the doors locked, don't answer if anyone you don't know comes to the door. There was a pause. Sarah, what's wrong? You're scaring me. It's probably nothing, Sarah said, though she didn't believe it. Just, something happened at work tonight, I want to be careful. Can you do that for me? Of course. But you're going to tell me what's going on when you get home. I will. I promise. I love you, Abuela. I love you too, mija. Be careful. Sarah ended the call and looked at Carlos, who'd been listening quietly. What do I do now? You finish your shift, Carlos said practically. You go home to your daughter. And tomorrow, you decide whether to stay involved or walk away from whatever this is. But even as he said it, Sarah knew it wasn't that simple. Vincent Romano had remembered her name after 5 years. He'd kept his promise to keep her safe. And now, when he was the one in danger, he'd come to her. There was a connection there, an obligation, a debt that couldn't be measured or easily dismissed. The clock above the counter read 4:33 a.m. 3.5 more hours until her shift ended. 3.5 hours to clean up the blood, to try to return the diner to normal, to pretend that nothing extraordinary had happened. But Sarah's hands wouldn't stop shaking, and her mind wouldn't stop replaying the moment when Vincent's eyes had opened, and he'd spoken her name. He's still alive, she whispered to herself, the words both a statement of fact and a question about what came next. The man who was supposed to be dead was alive, and somehow, impossibly, their fates were tangled together once again. Outside, the rain began to slow, the storm passing east toward the ocean. Inside the Riverside Diner, Sarah Martinez wiped down table 7 for the last time that night, removing all traces of the ghost who'd sat there, bleeding and desperate. But some stains, she knew, went deeper than what could be cleaned with soap and water. Some moments changed everything, no matter how much you wished you could go back to the simple, struggling, but predictable life you'd built. The bell above the door chimed as a taxi driver came in for his usual coffee. Carlos returned to the kitchen. The diner resumed its familiar rhythm, and Sarah served customers with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, wondering when, not if, but when, the consequences of tonight would come knocking at her door. Sarah's shift ended at 7 a.m., just as the first rays of November sunlight broke through the dissipating clouds. She'd cleaned the diner mechanically, going through familiar motions while her mind spun with questions and fears. Carlos had watched her carefully throughout the remaining hours, offering silent support but not pushing for answers she couldn't give. Go home, he said as she hung up her apron. Get some sleep. We'll talk tomorrow if you need to. Thanks, Carlos. Sarah managed a tired smile. For everything. For not asking too many questions. I didn't say I won't ask questions, he replied gently. I said we'll talk tomorrow. You're not alone in this, whatever it is. Remember that. The words brought unexpected tears to Sarah's eyes. She'd been alone for so long, raising Emma, working 2 jobs, managing every crisis by herself, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone offer support without conditions attached. The subway ride back to her apartment in Sunset Park took 40 minutes. Sarah sat in the corner of the car, watching Brooklyn wake up through the scratched windows. Commuters filled the seats around her. Nurses heading home from night shifts, construction workers starting their day, students with headphones and backpacks, normal people living normal lives, unaware that the woman in the stained uniform beside them had just encountered a ghost from a past she'd tried desperately to forget. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Brooklyn General Hospital, room 447. Come alone. Destroy this message. Sarah's heart hammered. She read it twice, memorizing the information, then deleted it as instructed. Vincent. It had to be. But how had he gotten her number? Then she remembered. He'd known about Emma 5 years ago, known where she went to school, probably knew everything about her life. Getting her phone number would have been simple for someone with his resources. The question was, should she go? By the time Sarah reached her apartment building, a 5-story walk-up with faded brick and fire escapes zigzagging down its face, she'd made her decision. She would go home, check on Emma, get a few hours of sleep, and then decide. Whatever Vincent Romano wanted, it could wait until she'd made sure her daughter was safe. Her grandmother, Rosa Martinez, was making breakfast when Sarah walked through the door. The smell of scrambled eggs and coffee filled the small kitchen, and Sarah's stomach reminded her that she hadn't eaten since her dinner break 12 hours ago. Mija, Rosa said, turning from the stove with concern etched on her weathered face. You look terrible. What happened? Long night, Sarah said, dropping her bag by the door. Where's Emma? Still sleeping? I gave her medicine at 6 and her fever broke. She's fine. Rosa studied her granddaughter with knowing eyes. But you're not. Sit down. Eat something. Then tell me what's really going on. Sarah sank into a kitchen chair, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. Her grandmother placed a plate of eggs and toast in front of her, along with a steaming cup of coffee. For a moment, Sarah just sat there staring at the food, trying to find the energy to explain. Someone from my past showed up at the diner last night, she finally said. Someone I thought I'd never see again. Rosa sat down across from her, folding her hands on the worn Formica table. The man who made you quit that restaurant job in Manhattan? The one you never talk about? Sarah's head snapped up. How did you? I'm your grandmother, not an idiot, Rosa said quietly. You came home that night 5 years ago, white as a ghost, quit your job the next day, changed your phone number, wouldn't even drive through Manhattan for months. Something scared you badly. I figured it was better not to push, that you'd tell me when you were ready. I wanted to protect you, Sarah whispered. Both of you. Emma was so little, and I'd already put her in danger just by being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And now this man is back? He was hurt, Abuela. Bleeding. He collapsed in the diner. The ambulance took him to Brooklyn General. Sarah pushed her eggs around the plate. He remembered my name. After all these years, he remembered. Rosa reached across the table and took her granddaughter's hand. Is he dangerous? Should we be worried? Sarah thought about Vincent's eyes when he'd whispered her name, about the promise he'd made 5 years ago, about the fact that Emma had grown up safe and unbothered because he'd kept his word. I don't think he wants to hurt us, she said slowly, but the people looking for him might. I don't know what to do. What does your heart tell you? It was such a Rosa question, practical and emotional at the same time. Sarah closed her eyes, searching for the answer. What did she feel, beneath the fear and confusion? That I owe him something, she admitted. He could have made me disappear 5 years ago. He could have decided I was a threat, but he didn't. He let me go, let me build this life, raise Emma in peace, and now he's the one in trouble. Then you already know what you're going to do, Rosa said simply. You're going to help him because that's who you are, but you're also going to be smart about it. You're going to protect Emma first. How? Sarah asked, feeling helpless. How do I do both? Rosa stood up, moving with the decisive energy of a woman who'd raised 3 children alone after her husband died. Emma and I are going to visit your Aunt Maria in New Jersey. We'll leave this morning. Stay there a few days. Take a little vacation. Abuela, you don't have to. Yes, I do. You need to handle this without worrying about us, and Emma will love seeing her cousins. Rosa cupped Sarah's face in her hands. But you promise me something, mija. You promise that when this is over, you'll walk away. Whatever debt you think you owe this man, one good turn deserves another. After that, you're even. Understood? Sarah nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I promise. Good. Now eat your breakfast, get a shower, and get some sleep. You look like you haven't rested in days. 3 hours later, after watching her grandmother and daughter leave in Aunt Maria's minivan, Sarah stood outside Brooklyn General Hospital. The modern building rose 12 stories, its glass and steel facade reflecting the midday sun. She'd changed into clean jeans and a sweater, pulled her hair back, tried to look normal even though nothing about this situation was normal. Room 447 was in the surgical wing. Sarah took the elevator up, her stomach churning with each ascending floor. What was she doing? Why was she here? But even as she questioned herself, her feet kept moving forward. The hallway was quiet, smelling of antiseptic and floor wax. Most of the rooms had their doors closed. Sarah found 447 at the end of the corridor, away from the nurse's station. She knocked softly. Come in. Vincent's voice was stronger than it had been in the diner, though still rough around the edges. Sarah pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room was standard hospital issue. White walls, beeping monitors, a window overlooking the parking lot. Vincent sat propped up in the bed, an IV line running into his arm, bandages visible beneath his hospital gown. His face was still pale, but his eyes were alert, tracking her movement as she closed the door behind her. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. 5 years had changed them both. Vincent had new lines around his eyes, gray threading through his dark hair at the temples. He looked thinner, harder, like someone who'd lived through difficulties Sarah could only imagine. But his eyes were the same, dark, intelligent, and surprisingly human. You came, he said finally. I shouldn't have. Sarah stayed by the door, maintaining distance. I should have deleted that text and forgotten about last night. But you didn't. No. She crossed her arms, defensive. You said you keep your promises. So do I. You kept me and Emma safe for 5 years. I couldn't let you. I had to make sure you were okay. Something shifted in Vincent's expression, gratitude mixed with regret. Sit down, Sarah, please. I'm not going to hurt you, and I can't exactly chase you down in my current condition. The attempt at humor was unexpected. Sarah found herself moving to the chair beside his bed, though she perched on the edge, ready to leave at any moment. How did you find me? She asked. How did you know I was working at that diner? I've always known where you were, Vincent admitted. Not watching you, not interfering, just keeping track, making sure you were safe like I promised. When I needed help last night, the diner was the closest place I could think of where I might find someone I could trust. Trust? Sarah's voice rose slightly. You don't even know me. I know you're a good person. I knew it 5 years ago when you walked into that private room by accident. I saw it in your eyes. Fear, yes, but also integrity. You weren't thinking about what you could gain from what you'd seen. You were thinking about your daughter, about doing the right thing. Vincent shifted in the bed, wincing slightly. Those kinds of people are rare, worth remembering. Sarah didn't know how to respond to that. Instead, she asked, What happened to you? Everyone thinks you're dead. I am dead, Vincent said. Or I was for 3 years. That was the plan. Fake my death, disappear, start over somewhere quiet. I was tired, Sarah, tired of the life, the constant looking over my shoulder, the compromises I wanted out. So you faked your death and ran? More or less. I had money saved, documents prepared, a place lined up in Montana. Small town, quiet life, no one asking questions. He looked out the window, his voice distant. It worked for a while. 3 years of peace. I worked construction, rented a cabin, learned to fish. It was simple, good. What changed? Vincent's jaw tightened. My younger brother, Marco. He got involved with some people I used to know. Dangerous people. He was always trying to prove himself, always wanting the life he thought I had. When I died, he stepped into my old world thinking he could handle it. But he couldn't, Sarah guessed. He made mistakes, trusted the wrong people, made deals without understanding the consequences. By the time I found out, he was in deep trouble. So I came back, tried to help him, tried to fix things quietly. Vincent turned back to face her. But word got out that I was alive, and suddenly everyone wanted to know where I'd been, what I knew, who I'd talked to. The FBI, my old associates, rival organizations, everyone. That's why someone hurt you. Someone decided I knew too much. Someone decided dead was safer than disappeared. He said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. I barely got away. Couldn't go to a hospital under my real name, couldn't risk being found. So I came to Brooklyn, to the one person I thought might help without asking too many questions. Sarah absorbed this, her mind working through the implications. Your brother? Where is he now? Safe? I got him out before things fell apart completely. He's in protective custody with a federal agent I trust. He'll testify about what he knows, get a deal, start over somewhere new. Vincent's expression softened. He's 26, Sarah. Just a kid who made stupid choices trying to live up to a ghost. I couldn't let him pay for my sins. There was genuine emotion in his voice. Pain, guilt, love for his brother. It made him seem more human, less like the dangerous figure from her memories. What do you want from me? Sarah asked quietly. Nothing you're not willing to give. I needed medical attention. Got it. I'm scheduled for release tomorrow, and then I disappear again, this time for good. The FBI has what they need from Marco. There's no reason for anyone to keep looking for me. He paused. But I wanted to thank you for helping last night, for not calling the police or turning me away. You could have, and I wouldn't have blamed you. You kept your promise, Sarah said. I kept mine, now we're even. Are we? Vincent studied her face. I remember what I said 5 years ago, that night in the restaurant. When you saw things you shouldn't have, do you remember? Sarah's mind went back to that private room, to the fear that had paralyzed her. You said to forget what I'd seen, to go home and take care of Emma. You said you'd make sure we stayed safe. I also said I might need a favor someday, that if I ever called it in, you'd help me, no questions asked. Vincent's voice was gentle. I never called in that favor, Sarah. Not in 5 years. I could have many times, but I didn't. Do you know why? She shook her head. Because the moment I said it, the moment I saw the fear in your eyes, I regretted it. You were just a kid trying to make a better life for your daughter. You didn't deserve to have that hanging over you. He leaned back against his pillows, looking suddenly exhausted. So I made a decision. I'd watch over you and Emma from a distance. make sure nothing from my world touched yours, and I'd never collect on that debt. You'd be free. Tears pricked Sarah's eyes unexpectedly. Then why tell me this now? Because I wanted you to know. When you leave this hospital, when you go back to your life, I want you to understand that you don't owe me anything. You never did. What you did last night, that was pure kindness, not obligation. And I want to thank you for it. Sarah wiped her eyes, struggling with emotions she couldn't quite name. All these years, she'd carried the weight of that night. The fear that someday Vincent Romano would show up demanding payment for his mercy. And now he was telling her it had never been real? That she'd been free all along? I don't understand you, she said finally. Everyone says you're this terrible person, this criminal. But you let me go. You protected Emma. You sacrificed your life, your identity to save your brother. Why? Vincent smiled, but it was sad. Because I'm not the person everyone thinks I am. I made choices I'm not proud of, Sarah. I did things I can't take back. But I never wanted to be what the newspapers called me. I got into that life because I was young and stupid and trying to survive. By the time I realized what I'd become, I was in too deep to get out easily. He looked down at his bandaged side. Faking my death was supposed to be my redemption. 3 years of peace, thinking maybe I'd paid my dues. Maybe I could actually have a normal life. Then Marco pulled me back in, and I realized you can't outrun your past. It finds you eventually. What will you do now? Sarah asked. Disappear again. For real this time. I have a new identity waiting, a place far from here. I'll heal, I'll leave, and Vincent Romano will stay dead. He met her eyes. And you'll never hear from me again. I promise you that. Sarah should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt a strange sadness. This man had been a shadow over her life for 5 years, a source of fear and what-ifs. But sitting here, listening to him talk about his brother, about redemption and regret, she saw someone different, someone trying, however imperfectly, to do right by the people he cared about. Can I ask you something? She said. Anything. That night 5 years ago when I walked into that room, who were those men? What were you doing? Vincent hesitated, then seemed to decide she deserved the truth. I was working with the FBI, had been for months. Undercover work, gathering evidence on corrupt agents and officials who were taking money from criminal organizations. That meeting you interrupted? I was recording everything, gathering names, building a case. Sarah's eyes widened. You were helping the FBI? Don't make me sound noble. I was doing it to get out, to earn my freedom, but yes, I was helping them. The information I provided led to indictments, resignations, cleaning up a lot of corruption. He smiled wryly. Of course, it also made me a target for everyone I'd informed on, hence the faked death. So you're not actually... I'm not innocent, Sarah. I did real crimes, made real mistakes, but I also tried to make amends. The world isn't black and white. People aren't just good or bad, we're all trying to navigate the gray spaces in between. A knock at the door interrupted them. A nurse poked her head in. Mr. Williams, time for your medication. Sarah stood up, recognizing the dismissal. I should go anyway. Wait, Vincent said. The nurse bustled in, checking his IV, making notes on her tablet. When she left, he continued. There's one more thing. In my jacket, the one I came in wearing, there's an envelope. The nurse put my belongings in that closet. Sarah retrieved the jacket, now cleaned but still showing signs of wear. She found the envelope in the inside pocket, thick with what felt like papers. What is this? Information, account numbers, passwords, locations of safety deposit boxes. Everything you'd need to access funds I've set aside. Vincent held up his hand as Sarah started to protest. I'm not giving it to you. I'm asking you to hold on to it. If something happens to me, if I don't make it to my next destination, that money should go somewhere useful. Pick a charity, a scholarship fund for single mothers. Whatever feels right. Just don't let it sit in some bank forever. Why me? Because I trust you. Because you're one of the few truly good people I've ever met. Because I know you'll do the right thing. Sarah looked at the envelope in her hands, feeling the weight of it. I don't want this responsibility. I know. But life rarely gives us what we want. Vincent's smile was gentle. Sometimes it gives us what we need to become who we're meant to be. That's very philosophical for someone in a hospital bed. I've had a lot of time to think over the past 3 years. Turns out solitude and near-death experiences make you contemplative. Despite everything, Sarah found herself smiling. She tucked the envelope into her purse. If you do make it to wherever you're going, how will I know? How will I know you're safe? You won't. And that's better for both of us. Clean break, Fresh starts. Vincent's expression grew serious. But I'll know about you. I'll check. From wherever I end up, make sure you and Emma are doing okay. Not interfering, just watching from a distance. One last promise I intend to keep. You don't have to do that. I know. But I will anyway. Some debts, he said softly, aren't about what's owed. They're about what's right. Sarah moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I think you're trying to be a better person than you were. That counts for something. Does it? Yeah, she said. It does. Good luck, Vincent. I hope you find whatever you're looking for. Thank you, Sarah. For everything. She left the room, walking quickly down the hospital corridor before she could change her mind or say something she'd regret. The elevator ride down felt surreal. She'd gone up to meet a ghost and found a man instead, flawed, regretful, trying to make amends for a complicated past. Outside, the November air was crisp and cold. Sarah pulled her jacket tighter and headed for the subway. Her phone buzzed with a text from her grandmother. We're here. Emma loves it. Stay as long as you need. Sarah typed back. Coming home tonight. Everything's fine. See you tomorrow. And maybe it was fine. Maybe this strange encounter, this glimpse into Vincent Romano's humanity, was exactly what she'd needed to finally close the chapter on that frightening night 5 years ago. She'd helped someone who'd once helped her. They were even. The debt was paid. As she descended into the subway station, Sarah realized she was still carrying the envelope. She'd find a safe place for it. Somewhere Emma would never accidentally discover it. And then she'd wait. Either Vincent would disappear as promised or something would happen, and she'd have to make a decision about the resources he'd entrusted to her. The train arrived and Sarah found a seat by the window. Her reflection looked back at her from the glass, tired but somehow lighter, as if a weight she'd been carrying had finally lifted. Whatever came next, she'd handle it. She always did. That night, back in her empty apartment, Sarah made herself dinner and sat at the kitchen table with the envelope. Inside, she found exactly what Vincent had described: account numbers, passwords, keys to safety deposit boxes in 3 different states. There was also a handwritten note on a single piece of paper. Sarah, if you're reading this and I'm gone, it means I didn't make it to my new life. I'm sorry to leave this burden with you, but I couldn't think of anyone else I'd trust with it. The total amount in these accounts is roughly $2.3 million. Money I saved over years, earned legally through investments and planning for a future I hope to have. Use it wisely. I'd suggest educational scholarships for kids from difficult backgrounds, or support for single mothers trying to build better lives. People like you, who deserve a chance. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for seeing me as more than what the world thought I was. And thank you for giving me hope that good people still exist. Take care of Emma. She's lucky to have you. VR. Sarah folded the note carefully and put everything back in the envelope. She wouldn't need it. Somehow she knew Vincent would make it to wherever he was going. He'd survived this long through intelligence and careful planning. He'd survive this too. But just in case, she tucked the envelope into a locked box in her closet, underneath winter sweaters and old photographs. A secret she'd carry, a trust she'd honor, a connection to a man who'd been both threat and protector, stranger and almost friend. Tomorrow, she'd go back to work at the grocery store. Tomorrow night, she'd serve coffee at the diner. Emma would come home from New Jersey and life would return to normal. But something had changed. Sarah felt it in her bones. She'd faced her past, looked it in the eye, and found not a monster, but a man trying to do better. Maybe that was the real lesson. Maybe we're all just trying to do better, navigate the gray spaces, make amends for our mistakes, and maybe sometimes helping each other through the darkness is what makes us human. Sarah turned off the lights and went to bed, sleeping better than she had in weeks. Outside, Brooklyn settled into night. Millions of stories unfolding in millions of apartments, each person carrying their own secrets, their own hopes, their own complicated pasts. And somewhere in a hospital room, Vincent Romano prepared for his final disappearing act, carrying with him the memory of a young woman's kindness and the hope that redemption, however imperfect, was still possible. 3 days passed in deceptive normalcy. Sarah returned to her routines. Morning shifts at the grocery store, evening shifts at the diner, precious hours with Emma in between. Her grandmother brought Emma home from New Jersey with stories about cousins and laughter, and life seemed to settle back into its familiar rhythm. But Sarah couldn't stop checking her phone, couldn't stop glancing over her shoulder, Couldn't stop thinking about the envelope hidden in her closet and the man who'd entrusted it to her. On the fourth day, everything changed. It was a Wednesday afternoon, Sarah's rare day off from both jobs. She'd taken Emma to the playground in Sunset Park, watching her daughter navigate the jungle gym with the fearless confidence of childhood. The autumn sun was warm, the sky a brilliant blue, and for a moment, Sarah let herself believe that maybe the past had finally stayed in the past. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Sarah Martinez? The voice was male, unfamiliar, with a slight Brooklyn accent. We need to talk about a mutual friend. Sarah's blood ran cold. She stood up from the bench, moving away from where Emma was playing. Who is this? My name is Marco Santini. I believe you know someone I'm looking for. Someone who was supposed to stay dead. Vincent's former associate. Sarah's hand tightened on the phone. I don't know what you're talking about. Please, Ms. Martinez, don't insult my intelligence. Vincent Romano was seen at your diner 4 nights ago. You helped him. The ambulance took him to Brooklyn General, but he checked himself out the next day. Nobody's seen him since. Marco's voice was calm, almost friendly, which somehow made it more frightening. I just want to talk to him. Help him, actually. We're old friends. I served a customer who collapsed. I called an ambulance, that's all I know. Sarah kept her voice steady, watching Emma on the swings. If you're looking for someone, try the police. The police can't help with this situation. But you can. There was a pause. You have a beautiful daughter, Sarah. Emma, right? 6 years old. She goes to PS 172, loves drawing, has a birthmark shaped like a heart on her left shoulder. The world seemed to tilt. Sarah's vision blurred with sudden fear and rage. Don't you dare. I'm not threatening anyone. Marco interrupted smoothly. I'm just demonstrating that I do my homework. I know about your grandmother, Rosa. I know about your apartment on 43rd Street. I know you work 2 jobs and struggle with bills. I'm a thorough person, Ms. Martinez. It's how I've survived in a difficult business. Sarah forced herself to breathe, to think. What do you want? Vincent's location. That's all. Tell me where he is, and you never hear from me again. You and your family go back to your normal lives completely safe. You have my word. And if I can't help you, then I'll have to look for him in other ways. Ask other people questions. Visit other places he might have connections to. Another pause. It would be unfortunate if Emma's school became part of my investigation. Children talk, you know. They notice things. It would be very stressful for her, having strangers asking questions, making her grandmother worried. It wasn't a direct threat, nothing that could be recorded or proven, but the implication was crystal clear. Sarah closed her eyes, fighting down panic. I don't know where he is. That's the truth. He left the hospital and I haven't heard from him since. Interesting, because I have information that suggests otherwise. Marco's voice hardened slightly. You were seen at the hospital. You spent 20 minutes in his room. You left carrying something. An envelope, perhaps? People notice these things, Ms. Martinez. Security cameras, nurses who remember faces. You'd be surprised what money can discover. Sarah's mind raced. How much did Marco actually know versus how much was he guessing? He thanked me for helping him, that's all that happened. Then you won't mind if I verify that personally. I'm a reasonable man, Sarah. May I call you Sarah? I think we should meet. Face to face, no intermediaries. Tonight, let's say 8 o'clock. There's a coffee shop on 4th Avenue, Milano's. Public place, lots of witnesses, we'll just talk, civilized conversation between adults. I have to work tonight. Call in sick. This is more important. Marco's tone left no room for argument. 8 o'clock, Milano's, come alone. If you bring anyone, police, friends, anyone, then our conversation becomes much more complicated. And we wouldn't want complications, would we? Not with Emma to think about. The line went dead. Sarah stood frozen, phone still pressed to her ear, watching her daughter laugh and play with innocent joy. How had this happened? She'd helped someone in need, shown basic human compassion, and now her daughter was being used as leverage by people who operated in shadows. Mama, Emma called from the swings. Watch me go high. I'm watching, baby. Sarah managed to call back, her voice cracking. Be careful. She needed help. But who? The police? What would she tell them? That a man had called and politely suggested they meet for coffee? There'd been no explicit threat, no clear crime. And if Marco had connections, if he really had found Vincent through hospital security and witnesses, then he might have connections in the police department too. Vincent had mentioned corrupt officials 5 years ago. How deep did that corruption run? Sarah pulled out her phone and dialed the one person who might understand. who might know what to do. The phone rang 4 times before Carlos answered. Sarah? What's wrong? You sound upset. Carlos, I need advice. Can you talk? Of course. Let me step outside. She heard movement, a door closing, then his voice came back clearer. Okay, I'm alone. Tell me what happened. Sarah explained everything. The phone call, Marco's veiled threats, the meeting he'd demanded. Carlos listened without interrupting, and when she finished, his sigh was heavy with concern. This is exactly what I was worried about, he said. That man from the diner. His world followed you home. I know. I was stupid to get involved. No, you were kind. There's a difference. But now we need to be smart. Carlos paused, thinking. Do you have any way to contact Vincent? Warn him that people are looking? No. He said it was better that way. Clean break. Then you need to assume he's already gone, already safe. This Marco person is fishing, hoping you'll lead him somewhere. Don't take the bait. But what about Emma? What if he really does? He won't, Carlos said firmly. These people operate on fear and intimidation, but actually harming a child. That brings heat they don't want. Police, FBI, media attention. He's trying to scare you into cooperation, that's all. It's working, Sarah admitted. I know. But listen to me. You don't go to that meeting. You don't engage with this person at all. You take Emma and your grandmother, and you visit your aunt in New Jersey again. Stay there a few days. Let this blow over. Sarah wanted to believe him, wanted to think it could be that simple. But something in Marco's voice had suggested he wouldn't just go away. He'd invested resources in finding Vincent. He wouldn't give up easily. Maybe you're right, she said, not believing it. I'll think about it. Sarah, I have to go. Emma's ready to leave. Thank you, Carlos, for everything. She ended the call before he could argue further, and gathered Emma from the playground. Her daughter chattered happily about the swings and the slides, about a friend she'd made who had a dog named Biscuit. Normal 6-year-old concerns, blissfully unaware of the darkness creeping around the edges of their life. Back at the apartment, Sarah made Emma an early dinner while her mind churned through options. Running to New Jersey might buy time, but it wasn't a solution. Marco knew where they lived, where Emma went to school. They couldn't hide forever. And Sarah couldn't quit her jobs, couldn't uproot their entire life because of one phone call. There had to be another way. At 6 o'clock, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from the same unknown number. Looking forward to our conversation. Don't be late. Sarah stared at the message, anger rising through her fear. Who did this Marco Santini think he was? Invading her life, threatening her family. She'd done nothing wrong except help someone who needed it. She refused to be bullied. She made a decision. At 7:30, after tucking Emma into bed with a story and a kiss, Sarah told her grandmother she needed to go out for an hour. Rosa looked at her granddaughter with knowing eyes. This is about that man, isn't it? The one from the diner. Yes? Is it dangerous? I don't think so. Just a conversation in a public place. Sarah tried to sound confident. I'll be back before 9. If I'm not, or if anything seems wrong, call this number. She handed Rosa a piece of paper with Carlos's phone number written on it. Tell him everything. Rosa gripped her hand. Be careful, mija. Some conversations change everything. I know, abuela, I know. Milano's coffee shop was exactly as Marco had described. Public, well-lit, full of people nursing lattes and working on laptops. Sarah arrived at 7:55, scanning the room for anyone who looked like they might be waiting for her. A man in a corner booth raised his hand slightly. He was in his early 40s, wearing an expensive suit without a tie, his dark hair slicked back. He had the kind of face that could be friendly or threatening depending on context. Average features, forgettable except for his eyes, which were sharp and calculating. Sarah approached the booth, her heart pounding. Marco Santini? Sarah Martinez. Please sit. He gestured to the seat across from him, smiling like they were old friends meeting for coffee. Thank you for coming. Can I get you something? Cappuccino? Espresso? I'm fine. Sarah sat down, keeping her purse close. Inside it, her phone was set to record audio. Not legal evidence, perhaps, but something. Let's just get this over with. What do you want? Direct. I appreciate that. Marco leaned back, studying her. I want to find Vincent Romano. I believe you can help me do that. I told you on the phone. I don't know where he is. But you spoke with him. At the hospital. What did he say? Sarah chose her words carefully. He thanked me for helping him at the diner. He said he was leaving New York, that's all. Leaving to go where? He didn't say. And I didn't ask. I wanted nothing to do with whatever situation he was involved in. Marco's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in his eyes. You're lying. Vincent doesn't trust easily. If he reached out to you, if he gave you time in that hospital room, he told you something. Maybe where he was going. Maybe how to contact him. Maybe he gave you something to hold for him. The envelope. He was fishing for the envelope. Sarah kept her expression neutral. He gave me nothing except gratitude. And then he left my life. Permanently, I hope. See, that's where we have a problem. Marco leaned forward, his voice dropping. Vincent Romano knows things. Things about business arrangements, about people in positions of power, about money and deals that were never supposed to see daylight. When he faked his death 3 years ago, those secrets died with him. Everyone moved on. But now he's alive and people are nervous. That's not my concern. It becomes your concern when those nervous people start making decisions about risk management. Vincent alive is a liability. And anyone connected to Vincent, anyone who might know what he knows, that's a liability too. The implication hung in the air. Sarah felt her chest tighten but forced herself to meet Marco's gaze. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining reality. Vincent trusted you with something, information, resources, I don't know what. That makes you valuable. And valuable people either cooperate or become problematic. Marco pulled out his phone, swiped to a photo and turned it toward her. Recognize this? Sarah's breath caught. It was a photo of Emma, taken that very afternoon at the playground. Her daughter on the swings, laughing, completely unaware she was being photographed. You had someone follow us, Sarah said, her voice shaking with fury. I had someone verify you were who you claimed to be. Just due diligence. Marco pulled the phone back. Beautiful child. It would be terrible if she grew up without her mother because of poor decisions. That was it. The line crossed. The moment Sarah's fear transformed into something harder, colder. She leaned forward, her voice low and intense. Let me explain something to you, Marco. I'm not part of your world. I don't know your secrets, I don't have your information, and I don't want anything to do with whatever game you're playing. I'm a single mother working 2 jobs to give my daughter a decent life. That's all I am. That's all I want to be. Then help me find Vincent and you can go back to being exactly that. I can't help you, even if I wanted to, I don't have what you're looking for. Sarah stood up, done with this conversation. Stay away from my daughter. Stay away from my family. Or I promise you I will go to every newspaper, every police station, every FBI office I can find, and tell them everything I know about Vincent Romano, about corrupt officials, about all of it. You want to talk about liabilities? I'll become the biggest liability you've ever seen. Marco's expression hardened. That would be very unwise. So is threatening a child. Sarah turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. Vincent Romano told me he was working with the FBI 5 years ago, that he helped bring down corrupt agents and officials. If he's alive, if he's out there somewhere, what makes you think he's not still working with them? What makes you think every conversation, every meeting, every phone call isn't being documented? It was a bluff. Sarah had no idea Vincent was in contact with any authorities, but she saw Marco's certainty waver just slightly. You're playing a dangerous game, he said. No, you are. I'm just trying to protect my family. There's a difference. Sarah walked out of the coffee shop, her legs shaking but her head held high. She didn't look back, didn't give Marco the satisfaction of seeing her fear. But once she was around the corner, out of sight, she leaned against a building and fought to catch her breath. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, different from Marco's. Well done, but he won't stop. Meet me at 347 Union Street in 1 hour. Come alone. This is Vincent. Sarah's hands trembled as she read the message. Vincent was still in New York. He'd been watching somehow, listening. He knew about Marco's approach. She should go home. Should grab Emma and Rosa and run to New Jersey like Carlos suggested. Should do the safe, smart thing. Instead, she pulled up the address on her phone. 347 Union Street. It took her a moment to recognize it, then memory clicked into place. Her father's auto repair shop. The one that had been closed for 3 years since he'd passed away. The one she still owned but couldn't afford to reopen or sell. How did Vincent know about that? But even as she asked the question, she knew the answer. He'd been watching, keeping track, knowing everything about her life. It was unsettling and protective at the same time. An invasion of privacy done with good intentions. Sarah checked her watch. 8:45. She could be at the shop by 9:30 if she caught the next bus. Rosa would be fine with Emma for another hour or two. And maybe, just maybe, Vincent had answers, had solutions, had a way to end this nightmare before it consumed her life completely. She sent a quick text to her grandmother. Going to be a little later than expected. Everything's fine. Love you. Then she headed for the bus stop, walking quickly through Brooklyn's evening streets. The repair shop was in Red Hook, an industrial neighborhood that had been slowly gentrifying. Her father had bought the property 20 years ago when it was affordable, built a small business fixing cars for the working-class families in the area. He'd died of a heart attack while Sarah was pregnant with Emma, leaving her the shop but no money to keep it running. It had sat empty ever since, waiting for a future she couldn't afford to build. The bus ride took 25 minutes. Sarah got off 2 blocks from the shop and walked the rest of the way, her senses hyper-alert for anyone following her. The streets were quieter here, fewer pedestrians, more warehouses and light industrial buildings. Her father's shop sat between a printing company and a closed bodega, its metal roll door tagged with graffiti, windows dark. Sarah pulled out her keys. She'd kept them all these years, unable to let go of the last piece of her father, and unlocked the side door. It opened with a creak that echoed in the empty space. "Hello?" she called softly, stepping inside. Lights flickered on. Vincent stood by the workbench at the back of the shop, looking better than he had in the hospital, but still gaunt, still tired. He was wearing different clothes, jeans and a dark hoodie, and his face showed several days of beard growth. "You came," he said. "Did I have a choice?" Sarah closed the door behind her, her anger from the coffee shop reigniting. "Your friend Marco made it pretty clear that cooperation wasn't optional. Marco's not my friend. He worked for my old organization, but we were never close." Vincent moved carefully, favoring his injured side. "I'm sorry he approached you. I was hoping he wouldn't make that connection. Well, he did. And now he's threatening my daughter, Vincent. He had someone take pictures of Emma at the playground. He knows everything about us." Sarah's voice broke. "I helped you, and this is what it cost me?" "I know, and I'm going to fix it." Vincent gestured to a folding chair by the workbench. "Please sit. Let me explain what's happening and how we're going to end this." Sarah remained standing, arms crossed. "How did you even know about this place? How did you know what happened at the coffee shop?" "I never left New York. I've been staying here, actually, in your shop." Vincent pointed to a corner where Sarah could now see a sleeping bag, some supplies. "When I left the hospital, I needed somewhere to recover that wasn't public, wasn't traceable. I remembered you mentioning your father's shop in conversation years ago. Public records showed you still owned it. Seemed like the safest place. You broke into my property. I picked the lock, and I've been maintaining it, cleaning, minor repairs. Consider it rent." Vincent almost smiled. "I also installed some security, cameras, listening devices. When Marco started asking questions in the neighborhood, I heard about it. When he set up the meeting, I monitored from here." He pulled out a small tablet, showed her audio waveforms. "I heard the whole conversation." Sarah didn't know whether to be angry about the invasion or grateful for the protection. "You've been spying on me for days? I've been watching over you. There's a difference." Vincent set down the tablet. "Sarah, Marco represents people who can't afford to have me alive and talking, but they also can't afford to make too much noise looking for me. Every inquiry, every witness they contact, it creates exposure. That's why he approached you so carefully. Public place, no direct threats, plausible deniability. He showed me a picture of Emma, which was meant to scare you into cooperation without actually crossing any legal lines. These people are sophisticated, Sarah. They operate in gray areas." Vincent paused. "But they're also predictable. And I think I know how to end this, protect you, and disappear permanently." "How?" Vincent pulled a manila folder from a backpack on the workbench. "Remember I told you I worked with the FBI 5 years ago? That I had evidence against corrupt officials? Yes, that evidence still exists. Safety deposit boxes in Manhattan, just like I told you in the envelope. Documents, recordings, photographs. Everything needed to reopen investigations into people who thought they were safe when I died." Vincent opened the folder, showed her copies of official-looking documents. "Marco's boss, Raymond Chen, is in these files. So are 3 FBI agents, 2 judges, and a city councilman." Sarah's eyes widened. "You're talking about exposing all of them?" "I'm talking about threatening to expose them. Mutually assured destruction." Vincent's expression was serious. "I contact Raymond Chen directly. Tell him that if anything happens to me, if anyone connected to me gets hurt, including you and your family, all of this goes public. Everything. Names, dates, transactions, recordings of conversations. It would destroy careers, lead to prosecutions. unravel years of carefully hidden corruption. And you think that will stop them? I know it will, because the alternative is worse than letting me disappear. One man going quietly into the night versus a scandal that brings down an entire network? Vincent shook his head. They'll choose survival. They always do. Sarah paced the shop floor, processing this. What about Marco? He's already invested in finding you. Marco follows orders. Once Raymond Chen tells him to back off, he will. These people are pragmatic, not emotional. Vincent closed the folder. But I need your help to make this work. Of course you do, Sarah said bitterly. The evidence is in a safety deposit box at a bank in Manhattan. I need to retrieve it personally. Biometric security. Can't be delegated. But I'm still weak from my injury. And Manhattan is Marco's territory. I need someone with me who looks normal, unremarkable. A couple running errands, not a wanted man sneaking around. You want me to go with you to Manhattan? Tomorrow? While Marco's people are actively looking for you? Exactly because they're looking for me alone. A man and a woman together looking like a normal couple. We'd be invisible. Vincent met her eyes. One trip, Sarah. We go to the bank, retrieve the evidence, make contact with Raymond Chen, and it's over. Marco backs off. I leave New York forever, and you get your life back. Why should I trust you? Because I've had multiple opportunities to hurt you or use you, and I haven't. Because I kept you safe for 5 years when I didn't have to. Because despite everything, you know I'm trying to do the right thing here. Vincent's voice softened. And because you don't really have another option. Marco won't stop looking, and running only delays the inevitable. We need to end this definitively. Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to find a flaw in his logic, but he was right. She'd already tried the tough approach with Marco, and it had only bought her time. As long as Vincent was a mystery, as long as people thought she might know something, she and Emma would remain targets. If I do this, Sarah said slowly, if I help you tomorrow, you promise it ends there? No more contact? No more watching over me? No more entanglements? I promise after tomorrow Vincent Romano stays dead, and Sarah Martinez goes back to being just a hard-working mother and waitress. And the envelope you gave me? The accounts, the money? Keep it. If something happens to me, use it how you think best. If nothing does, consider it insurance. Emergency fund for you and Emma. Vincent smiled slightly. Every single mother should have a safety net. Sarah thought about Emma, about the future, about the bills that never stopped coming and the dreams she'd put on hold. She thought about her father, who taught her to help people in need, and about the choice she'd made 4 nights ago when a man collapsed in her diner. She couldn't undo that choice, but she could see it through to the end. What time tomorrow? She asked. Early. 6 a.m. We'll take the subway to Manhattan, be at the bank when it opens at 8. Retrieve the evidence, make the call, be back in Brooklyn by noon. You'll barely miss work. I'll need to arrange for my grandmother to take Emma to school. Of course. Tell her you have a doctor's appointment or something normal. Vincent extended his hand. Partners for one more day? Sarah looked at his hand, then at his face. In the dim light of the shop, he looked less like the feared Mafia boss from the headlines and more like what he really was. A tired man trying to outrun his past and protect the few people he cared about. She shook his hand. One day, then we're done. Deal. Sarah left the shop 20 minutes later, walking quickly back to the bus stop. The November night was cold and she pulled her jacket tight, her mind already racing through what tomorrow would bring. One trip to Manhattan, one retrieval of evidence, one call to end it all. It sounded simple, but Sarah had learned that nothing involving Vincent Romano was ever truly simple. Back at her apartment, she found Rosa waiting up, worry etched on her face. Everything okay, mija? Yes, abuela. Just handling some things. Sarah hugged her grandmother. I need a favor tomorrow. Can you take Emma to school? I have an early appointment. Of course, what kind of appointment? Just something I need to take care of. I'll be back by lunch. Rosa studied her granddaughter's face, reading the truth beneath the evasion. This is dangerous, isn't it? No more dangerous than doing nothing. That's not reassuring. I know. Sarah kissed her grandmother's forehead. But after tomorrow, it'll be over. I promise. No more secrets, no more surprises. Just our normal life. I'll hold you to that, Rosa said quietly. That night, Sarah lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Tomorrow she would walk back into Vincent Romano's world one last time. Tomorrow she would help a man she barely knew, trusted uncertainly, and couldn't quite figure out. But tomorrow she would also protect her daughter, reclaim her peace, and close a chapter that should have ended 5 years ago. In the darkness, Sarah whispered a prayer her grandmother had taught her as a child, a prayer for protection, for wisdom, for the strength to do what was necessary, even when you were afraid. Tomorrow would bring answers. Tonight brought only questions and the steady rhythm of her daughter's breathing from the next room, reminding her what really mattered, what she was really fighting for. Outside, Brooklyn slept, and in a repair shop in Red Hook, Vincent Romano prepared for the final act of his complicated redemption, hoping that this time, his death would stick. The morning air was crisp as Sarah met Vincent at the subway station. They rode to Manhattan in silence, looking like any other couple heading to work. At the bank, Vincent retrieved a sealed box containing documents, recordings, and photographs, evidence of years of corruption. "This ends it," he said, pulling out his phone. He called Raymond Chen, Marco's superior, and explained the situation calmly. "If anything happens to me or Sarah Martinez and her family, everything goes public. Every name, every transaction, every corrupt deal. You have my word. Leave us alone, and this stays buried forever." The silence on the other end was long. Then, "Agreed. Marco will stand down immediately." 2 hours later, Sarah received a text from Marco. "Apologies for the misunderstanding. You won't hear from me again." Vincent smiled wearily. "It's done." They returned to Brooklyn. At the repair shop, Vincent gathered his belongings. "Thank you, Sarah, for everything. You saved my life twice. Once in the diner, once by trusting me. Will you be okay?" she asked. "I will. New name, new place, new life, this time for good." He handed her an envelope. "For Emma's education." No arguments. Sarah watched him disappear into the morning crowd, finally free. She returned home to Emma's laughter, to normal life, to peace. The past was finally behind her. Some debts, she realized, were paid with kindness, and sometimes, helping a stranger changed everything.